Welcome to In the Envelope, a podcast from Backstage, the #1 resource for actors and talent seekers. I am your host, Jack Smart, awards editor at Backstage, and I'm here to guide you through every aspect of the entertainment industry with the help of some of your favorite stars. These intimate, inspirational conversations with today's most award-worthy film, television, and theater artists provide you, dear listener, advice on how to live the creative life, personal stories of success and failure alike, and maybe, just maybe, a tantalizing glimpse in the envelope.
I'm such a rule follower and I'm very moralistic, so in general for me the pandemic was like, I would not take a risk under any circumstances, but even with the show it became even more intense, and so I was living in complete isolation. It was really just me and Monica.
Wild.
Monica was my only friend to talk to.
Welcome, listeners, to another episode of In the Envelope. I'm Jack. I'm joined here by another very special guest, a frequent, special, favorite guest on the podcast, Katie Menard. Would you like to introduce yourself or reintroduce yourself to listeners?
Yeah, as a favorite, apparently.
Yeah.
I'm Katie Menard. I'm the social media manager at Backstage. I manage all our social media.
It's pretty self-explanatory, yeah.
Yes, it is, really. It's very descriptive.
And now is a great time to have you back on the podcast because, first of all, today's guest is Beanie Feldstein, the
big
voice
fan.
listeners just heard. Are you a big fan? Do you want to tell listeners what poster you have hanging on the wall right in front of you?
I have a giant Booksmart poster I'm currently sitting in front of. Lady Bird is my favorite movie, period. Yeah. I already have multiple tickets to see her in Funny Girl.
Oh, really?
I do,
amazing.
yeah. I mean, that's just the pinnacle of my interests.
That's amazing. Those projects you just mentioned, Lady Bird and Booksmart, are very much what kind of solidified, I would say, Beanie Feldstein's star status. But now, can we say she's like a full-blown A-lister, award contender in multiple areas, multiple projects?
I mean, she basically is in 3 areas this coming year. I mean, we've got Impeachment, The Humans, and Funny Girl.
TV, film, and theater. She does it all.
True triple threat.
Absolutely. Beanie was probably one of the best interviews we've had on this podcast because she gets Backstage. She knows Backstage. She loves Backstage.
Mm-hmm. Instinctive.
Absolutely. That's what it is. She knows what I'm going to ask. She knows that we're here to talk about the craft and career advice. She knows how to give that advice to her fellow artists. She's kind of the dream.
She really is.
There's not much more to say. I mean, we should mention that Impeachment, who does she play on Impeachment?
Monica Lewinsky.
Monica Lewinsky. For those who don't know, who've been living in a hole, American Crime Story's newest installment is all about the impeachment trial of Bill Clinton. And it really centers on Beanie Feldstein's Monica Lewinsky.
Which is a daunting task.
Very.
For anyone, I would say.
But Beanie gets into it. And again, it's about the distinction between the stage process versus the screen process. And she really sheds light on that. Is that all we have to say about Beanie Feldstein? We just got to get to this interview.
I mean, I could do a TED Talk about the line read of it is the titular role. Like, yes. I mean, it's iconic at this point, but.
I was going to joke that today's episode of In the Envelope, Beanie Feldstein plays the envelope, and it's the titular role.
It's the titular role. Yeah, I guess that would be our Tempest. Yeah, I mean, I really think it's really nice getting to see Beanie's rise from, an emerging talent to a huge leading lady awards contender in multiple acting avenues.
Totally. I really have my fingers crossed for a lot of these acting avenues, as you say. But speaking of emerging talent...
I segued.
Really great segue into this week's Backstage issue. And I do think that, Beanie Feldstein is, can we say, emerged talent?
I feel like she's like the ideal end result.
Yeah.
Of the emerging talent character arc.
Yeah, that sweet spot of what Backstage, we at Backstage just really like to highlight the up-and-comers. Mm-hmm. And this week in the magazine and on the website, we are doing that with an emerging talent portfolio, which we will link to in the episode description and the article that goes with this piece. But Katie, what else is going on in that issue or from your end on social?
Yeah, I mean, we have our cover story interviews with Ariana DeBose, who, I mean, very similar. I'm sure people listening to this episode will be familiar and also a fan of hers. Someone who has also emerged from the Broadway stage to be an awards contender in film and worked on a Ryan Murphy project of late.
Oh, yeah.
And done stage-to-film adaptations, also taking on another iconic role in a different way of Anita in West Side Story.
So exciting. It's this thing of like about to be a household name, where I feel like Beanie's just made that transition.
Just made it,
and Ariana DeBose is like making that transition. Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's Backstage's sweet spot.
Yeah.
Anyway, this is all so great. Anything else with that emerging talent issue? Anything else we got to plug, Katie? Are you already getting ready to live tweet some shows?
I feel like I just did it.
I know.
It's interesting.
There's no such thing as awards season.
There's not a season anymore. And that was already happening before COVID, but it really pushed things around. But yeah, I'm excited for the SAG Awards, are especially fun for Backstage because they're, actors first. That's our traditional primary audience. So those are always fun. And I love that the SAGs have ensemble categories. I feel like that's something lacking in every other award show.
Way to plug that. Yeah, I completely agree.
Do. That's kind of my favorite thing about the SAGs is I love that they have ensemble recognition.
Same. I mean, acting is a team sport. You actually just tied it back to Beanie Feldstein.
I was going to say, thinking about like the humans, that's like
totally
an ensemble. Yeah.
It's 6 actors acting as one. And she speaks to that. Like that is her process.
And that's exciting for me to watch just as an audience member. I love a good ensemble.
When an ensemble of actors is greater than the sum of their parts, those are my favorite performances for sure. Well, thank you, Katie. One last thing I have to mention to listeners is this podcast has been airing weekly, but a PSA that going forward as of next week, we're taking next week off due to Thanksgiving, but then we will continue to air episodes every other week. For the most part, there will still be certain times of year when we have plenty of guests, as we've done in the past. But for the most part, we are switching from weekly to bi-weekly. Every other week means bi-weekly.
Yes.
Sometimes bi-weekly means twice a week.
It's every other week.
Every other week is the better way of putting it. Because when people say bi-annually, they sometimes mean twice a year and they sometimes mean every other year. Anyway. Thank you, Katie, for joining us. Do you want to make sure that listeners are following along with Backstage's social media accounts?
Yeah, follow Backstage on social. We're on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, LinkedIn.
Follow Backstage's TikTok.
YouTube. Yeah, follow our TikTok.
Well, thank you so much, Katie. Let's take a quick break and then get to this interview with the one and only Beanie Feldstein.
Yay!
This podcast is, of course, brought to you, listeners, by Backstage. Listen, aside from all the great inspiration and tips and all of that stuff we offer for free, like this amazing podcast, Backstage also gives you access to incredible casting calls all over the world. That is why it's the world's #1 casting platform. If you're curious or if you're an actor yourself and you really want to jumpstart your career and you're ready to take the advice and the inspiration you've heard here in this very episode and use it, go to backstage.com/subscribe and enter the code ENVELOPE, ENVELOPE. That's, again, 30 days completely free to try Backstage, where you can make a profile, upload a headshot, upload a reel, start browsing the casting notices, and start applying to jobs, because who knows, maybe one day I'll be interviewing you. Again, that's backstage.com/subscribe and enter the code ENVELOPE. Beanie Feldstein, a theater kid through and through, is now a veritable film and TV star, recently portraying Monica Lewinsky on FX's Impeachment, American Crime Story, and starring in A24's horror film The Humans from Stephen Karam. Her breakout roles in Neighbors 2 Sorority Rising and the SAG-nominated Lady Bird led to an award-winning turn in Olivia Wilde's Booksmart, and she'll next feature in the years-long filming of Richard Linklater's Merrily We Roll Along, and return to Broadway this spring as Fanny Brice in Funny Girl. Here is the irresistible Beanie Feldstein. Beanie Feldstein, I'm so excited to talk to you. How are you?
I'm good. How are you? It's all happening here today.
It's happening. It's Monday. It's happening.
Yeah.
You know Backstage. Do you know Backstage?
Of course.
What is your history with Backstage?
I think I wasn't really a child actor in any real sense of the word.
Yeah.
But my parents always encouraged my love of the arts and really encouraged my love of theater specifically, and we're very open to me doing as much as I can within the theater space, because theater is very different than film and television, where if you get one show, which, spoiler alert, I did not, but if you did, and you went to Broadway or you did a professional production, eventually you would be too tall or you would outgrow this situation. And so it wouldn't be like you're missing your entire adolescence. It would just have been like you're missing a year, 5th grade or 8th grade, or, so they let me audition for theater, all that to say. And I remember going to get the physical copies to see if there were any auditions in LA. And I will say that I did, I never got anything on Broadway, but I did audition for a production of Annie in La Mirada, California. And I ended up playing Kate, one of the orphans.
Okay.
But I think we must have found the audition in Backstage.
Very cool. That's so lovely. This makes sense to me that, because of course I was going to ask, what's the kind of origin story of your background in the arts with you have two parents who were, is it safe to say, kind of in the industry, but more like adjacent to the industry. And so for your acting dreams, they were like, let's go the theater route to keep this, to keep her safer than.
I think I could not have had more supportive parents as far as my mom schlepping me to my community theater after school every day to do, every rehearsal for every musical from the age of 7. So they were so supportive, but they also really saw that I really loved school, and I was a very academic person.
Sure.
And they wanted to, I think they did an incredible job of kind of honoring each of us where we were at, and they could see that I was a very academic young person and child, and that I loved school. And so they were trying to, they explained to me, if you were to get a sitcom or something, that would eliminate your entire ability to go to school in the typical way. And they could see that mattered to me. So,
Gotcha.
But they were really encouraging, but they wanted me to enjoy school and kind of have that time as well. And then I was the one, when I got a little bit older, that decided to go to college in the more traditional route and not pursue a BFA program, even though so many of my dearest friends were going that route. And it's such a beautiful choice. For me, school really mattered, and I wanted that kind of true academic experience over an artistic experience. So it ended up the tables kind of turned later in my life, where I was the one that was like, school really matters to me. And my parents were kind of shocked. They thought that I would do, specifically my mom definitely thought I would do a Carnegie Mellon, CCM, UMich sort of musical theater training. And as beautiful as those schools are, for me, it was definitely right to pursue a more purely academic time, I guess, experience. So,
It's so great that you knew that, because I imagine that, especially with Stagedoor Manor, that a lot of your peers are going the conservatory route. That's the path.
I think we were really split my year, actually. A few of us were in the Wesleyan, Northwestern sort of place of things where you're going to a school that has incredible arts, but isn't a purely BFA situation. Yeah. And then so many of my friends, of course, went that route. And it was definitely, it was unexpected, I think. I think like my early high school years, I was convinced that I would do that. And then something sort of shifted my junior year of high school. And I sort of really started to acknowledge how much I loved school and that I hadn't really been honoring that side of myself as much. And I was like, I really think that I need the next 4 years. I need to allow myself to honor that side of my brain and that side of my personhood and my identity. And it ended up being totally the right decision. And I still did, I think I did 14 shows at Wesleyan.
Wow.
All just like directed by students or the whole creative team was students versus like department. But yeah, I was still always doing theater. There was never a world where I wasn't gonna do theater. So
like you knew that. It's this great. I feel like right off the bat, this is great advice for especially like teens, kid actors. Like at the beginning of their career, like it is about knowing as best you can the best educated guess for what it is that you want or need in terms of your education. Yeah. And I obviously we always ask like what was the initial goal? What was the initial dream? But as you've just pointed out, it shifts. It just changes all the time. It probably still is for you, right?
Oh my God, absolutely. I couldn't have said it better. I think, I mean, I would say from the time I was 3 to 15, I would have said purely musical theater. And then kind of
Broadway.
16, 17, 18, I thought I'm really a student and I want to explore that side of myself. And then the first professional opportunities that I got were in film and television, which was such a surprise to me. And really a medium that I did not know. You know, I always say that for theater, you can really practice. Like when I was doing my shows at the Morgan Wixon Theater on Pico Boulevard in LA and Santa Monica, like true community theater, I was doing the youth musicals at a community theater. But for me, I took it just as seriously, and everyone around me took it just as seriously as a situation where you were being paid.
Totally.
And I remember even when I was rehearsing for Hello, Dolly, I thought, Anne, our incredible director at the Morgan Wixon, who works for a lawyer during the day and just does this as her passion, Anne taught me everything I needed to know to get here. And I really believe that you can practice professional musical theater. To be a professional musical theater artist, you have the place to practice, which is student theater, community theater, to go to a program. But for film and television, you can't emulate what it's like to be on a professional set. There's no kind of, because it takes so much money and so many people and equipment and all of these things that can't necessarily be emulated at a high school or middle school like you can with theater, where you really all put your heads together, you rehearse for 8 weeks, and then you put on a show, So it was so new to me. And now I think it's a medium that I've fallen in love with. Like I sort of see my 20s as like this period of time where I was falling in love with film and television in a way that my whole life I'd loved theater. But this feels like a new sort of addition to my love of acting. Because it's sort of like, okay, you're an athlete, but are you a swimmer or do you play basketball? Like they really feel different.
Yeah.
And so I sort of thought, what if I A, don't like it, or B, don't know how to do it? I actually feel way less nervous on a set than I do on stage, which has been like a really unique surprise to me. I think because I grew up on stage. I don't know. I think it's because I love it so much that I put there's like expectations and pressure that come from like my childhood and my childhood self and all of that. Whereas with film and television, I'm actually never really that nervous. I just sort of feel like a sponge. I'm just trying to like soak all the kind of knowledge and goodness that I can.
Yeah, I mean, and I'm definitely going to ask you about the humans because I feel like the humans is relevant to that topic. But like you're saying, film and TV is trial and error, or it's a trial by fire. There's no, right? And so what are the overlaps in terms of the craft, in terms of like approaching a character that you're creating for the stage versus the camera?
I mean, so much of it is the way that you start is exactly the same. I think of who is this girl or this person, or who is this person? What about them do I feel like, in the Venn diagram of the character and of me, like where does it overlap? And then what do I need to sort of take away from my own instincts or push forward in my own instincts and kind of navigate what parts of Beanie I need to sort of tuck away and what parts of Beanie I need to sort of push forward. And then kind of, if you're playing someone real, as I have recently, you have to layer in the historical truth of the moment, any video footage that you have, to create the exact person that person is or was. And when you're crafting something that is fictional, then you kind of just get to layer in everything else that just kind of comes instinctually from whatever is on the page. But I think the beginning is the same. For me, it's the actual performing of it that is so different, because with theater, all of your energy comes from the experience of liveness. Like, you are out there with your castmates, with the crew, and if something goes wrong, there's no trying it again. You have to just and the audience is right there with you, and there's this incredible energy. I just got to see Adrienne Warren in her second to last performance as Tina. Oh my God. And the energy that she was giving us as the audience and the audience was giving her, it was just, you could feel it hanging in the air. And with film and TV, there's none of that.
Yeah.
And the energy has to come from sort of within, I think. And also there's this thing of, you're never going to do this again. So today is the only day that I'm going to play Monica at the grand jury. This is the only time. So there's, the stakes feel very high in that way. Whereas with theater, you think, okay, later today I can fix the thing that I didn't nail this afternoon. There's,
if that mistake happens, you get to do it over. Yeah,
exactly. So I think the source of energy feels very different, but where you start is sort of the same of who is this?
That's so cool. Yeah. And of course you're already answering all my questions, by the way.
Just tell me when to stop talking.
I know you have a theater kid brain. And so I know this is going to be so good. You're already so good at talking about the craft, but this notion of invention versus recreating, I want to get to with Monica. Yeah. But as far as invention is, as you're saying, it's the part of every role, no matter what the role is. And there's research and there's backstory. Do you invent backstory? Are you doing detailing? Of course, I'm super fascinated in the idea of the Venn diagram between you and the character.
I think it really depends on the project. I'm such as myself, I'm such a people person. So for me, it's often, no matter what the dynamic is with your castmate, whatever dynamic you're playing, for me, I always just feel like I can go my deepest and do my best if I know the people around me. So whether that's other castmates or the crew is another imperative part of the process of I could cry right now, but I cried saying goodbye to our camera operators at the end of Impeachment, because those two guys, Eric and Jamie, were this, 1 foot from me half the time that we were shooting. Yeah. And if I didn't trust them and ask them about their kids and know them, I wouldn't have been able to do my job, because I, as Beanie, have to be comfortable. I have to and for me, being comfortable is knowing everyone and being in a team,
Yeah, yeah.
So yeah, I really got emotional saying goodbye to them. And when I think about the experience of filming the show, I think about the crew just as much as my castmates, because they're also with you. And with theater, they're visible. I mean, excuse me, unlike with theater, in film, they're visible to you. So, I always used to joke with Eric, our camera operator, be like, my job is to just take a eraser and erase you from my field of vision. But really, I'm looking at him and a camera and Sarah Paulson as Linda Tripp. You know, it's like all of it is in your field of vision. So if I don't trust him and if I don't know that we're all on the same mission, like I can't really do my job. So much for me is like just feeling less like backstory and character and more just like finding my team.
Sure. Yeah.
And knowing, and then with theater, it's like literally these people are going to catch you if you fall. Like Taylor Trent physically peeled my body off of the ground multiple times. Like he literally had to pick me up. So if I don't know that he's going to do that, then how can you go on stage with these people every night?
Yeah. So, you can't be as committed to the performance if you don't have that faith.
Yeah. And I think like this whole, I always say if someone to my family or like my partner, like if I ever come off as like an ounce, if there's an ounce of jadedness in me ever, just like just smack it out of me or something, like just sit down and like, because in my mind, acting is a team sport. There is no me, there is no whatever. It doesn't matter what part you're doing. You could not physically do it without everyone else around you. So that to me is like the most important thing is kind of like feeling my team and yeah, just getting to know people. I just have to like, and so like,
that's so great
with Booksmart, like Kaitlyn and Olivia and I and Katie Silverman who wrote it, like we talked a lot about Molly and Amy and their backstory, but more we just got to know each other, you know, when we felt comfortable and we lived together. So that's a whole other thing. But we, you know, like if I didn't know that like I could walk into Kaitlyn's room with like toothpaste all over my face and she would like wipe it off, you know what I mean? Like that is friendship. And so we have to like, know, be comfortable with one another. I'm really not method. Like anyone that has ever worked with me would laugh. Like I'm like the least method person in the world, but I think the feeling of trust with the people around you is like the most important thing.
Is the most direct. It's so cool to hear that that's like the most direct inspiration for the work ethic, for like the professionalism of it, but also like the crafting of the characters. Because as you've said, I feel like specialize in these like female friendships or in this idea of like platonic love in something like Booksmart, which I think is also sort of a twisted version of that in Impeachment with Sarah Paulson. But it's cool to hear that like for actors listening to this that also consider themselves maybe like you, a theater trained person, or like you say, a people person, that's what might work for them. But you're saying for other people, maybe it is more bookish. Maybe there's a lot more research and backstory. Maybe it's a lot more method. Some people, you know, stay in character between takes. That's their own. And it sounds like you guys are just goofing off between takes.
I'm a what did someone say to me? My partner said you're a cookie and a laugh between takes type of person.
A cookie too. Yeah.
Oh, always a cookie. Always a dairy-free dessert in reach at all times. But I don't know. I just, for me personally, I have to sort of like conserve my energy. So if I were to stay in the accent or the character between takes, it would feel like expending energy. It's too much energy. I need to kind of conserve that within like a 16-hour day. You know, I think like try to use the on and off kind of nature of filming to my advantage of like, okay, this is when you have to be on. And then this is when you can like refuel, get to know someone, ask someone about their day, you know, have a snack, of course.
Sure. Those are great tips.
You know, for TV, oh my God. For TV, I used all that time to be working on next day's stuff because there's just no time. I mean, I've never done television in this way before. I've been very lucky to be a guest in other people's worlds, which is not as much of a, you know, workload. And with Impeachment, we shot for 170 days. We shot for 10 months. And, you know, you could have 6 pages wall-to-wall of dialogue one day, and then the next day the same thing, and you have to be prepared. So in between takes of, you know, if I would be in crying and having this, big emotional scene, in between I would be running lines for tomorrow. So there was almost like no time to lose.
And that running lines for tomorrow is a form of recharging because you are just shifting gears out of that heavy scene.
Yeah, exactly. Like it's just like getting your head out of it. Annika, who was one of our second ADs on Impeachment, she was like, I've never seen someone come out of such an intense scene and just I think it's almost like I crave the break. Like not necessarily the break as far as like the rest, but like the break of the energy. Like I need to.
Sure.
But I found it harder on Impeachment than I ever had in the past. Like it used to come very easily to me. There were certain days on Impeachment where even I couldn't shake it between, because it was just difficult and very raw, and Monica was very traumatized, and so even I couldn't sort of surrender to my instinct like I normally would. So yeah, that was a new experience for me for sure.
Well, and that definitely leads me to and specifically with Impeachment, you said this at a Q&A recently, moderated by Monica Lewinsky, which was fascinating, so fascinating, that this was kind of your first drama. And that kind of blew my mind, because I feel like in my speaking to actors, they always kind of deny that there's a difference. And they always say like, no, it's all the same, drama, comedy. I don't see them as different genres or anything. But to your point, this was your first time reenacting that kind of really lived in trauma, right? And like,
I think because it was a real person story.
That too.
And a living person who texts me and calls me, like it just had,
and is involved in the project. Yeah,
it had a different emotional weight. Like the stakes and the responsibility were so kind of profoundly high that I think it took it to a different place. But I think that every project is going to kind of, or every opportunity is going to sort of fill you up in certain ways and deplete you in certain ways. And I think like for Hello Dolly, for instance, like the joy that would like radiate through my body when we would come off stage, just because it's such a joyful show and it's a farce and you're laughing and you're singing and I got to dance so much. Like there was so much joy, but physically my body was depleted. Like, my shoulder would hurt, my calves would hurt, my neck, that show was emotionally input. Like it was so joyful. We would leave happier every single day than when we walked in. But physically it was wearing a 20-pound dress every night. And, it was tough on my body in a way that I've never experienced. Whereas Impeachment was so emotionally taxing, but it didn't have that same like physical component to it, and so each thing sort of has its own gives and takes. But I do think that being in a drama felt different, and also the medium. It was a simultaneous thing, like I had the longest thing I'd ever filmed was 40 days. And that was Neighbors 2, which was my first film where I was not in every day. But that was like the course of the film was 40 days. And then this was 170. So just the kind of all of that was so new. So I don't know if it was like I think it was a combination of both things, like the medium and the genre layered on top of one another.
Because TV is it has a similarity to theater because it's long form. Right.
Which I think people have asked me in the past, like, what's your favorite? And it doesn't, I can't say, because it's like my childhood self and my adult self would have, I can't like deny one for the other, it's like, but the amazing thing about TV is just, for Impeachment, each episode was over an hour. We did 10 episodes. It was just the amount of time that you could spend with not only your character, but for inside the whole story. And it sort of flesh things out deeper and deeper and deeper, just because there's so much more real estate to play with. Whereas with theater or with film, you only get 2.5 hours with that character and that story, So I don't know, each one has their own like shiny pluses that I could never decide. And I when I got to work with Laurie Metcalf and Tracy Letts on Lady Bird, I was so young, and I remember just thinking, like, I just want to be like them. I just want, I mean, who doesn't want to be like them? Hell. But I just want to, you know, I remember Laurie was promoting Lady Bird and doing A Doll's House Part 2. And I thought, that is, oh my
the dream.
Like, that is what I want to do forever. And I feel so lucky, knock wood, that transcending medium and going in and out and has been a part of my journey just thus far. And I hope to sort of always continue that, because you always want a challenge, and inherently changing the medium becomes a huge challenge after going from one into the other.
Sure. Well, and the notion of long form TV too, especially for a project like this, where like it was also filmed before and then after kind of the pandemic, right?
It was actually filmed entirely during the pandemic.
Oh, okay.
No, we were supposed to start in March 2020. We never did. And we started in truth in November 2020, first week of November. And we wrapped at the end of August 2021.
This project, it defines your pandemic. Like when you look back on the pandemic, you're going to think about Monica Lewinsky, which is so wild to me.
1000%. I mean, it in every possible way, because when I was already prepared to start in March, obviously, but then when we didn't start, it gave me even more time to go even deeper.
Which is good. And also, you know, the research and the portrayal was really, I've never been sort of gutted before by work. Sure.
And listening to, it gave me more time to basically re-listen to the Linda Tripp tapes. And as helpful as that, it was equal parts helpful, because all you ever want as an actor is to know, like, what your character's thinking and feeling on every given moment. And I had that. But I had that for the worst reason. So it was really complicated in me to listen knowing the circumstances. But of course I could not listen, because of it's part of my job to listen and know everything about her. And
but there's an over-preparedness danger.
I think more just like it just hurt me to listen to her not know. Like, it was just
going back to this idea of the energy that you have to expend on a project that depletes, to go to think about that.
It was so, and then anytime I would get, you know, I remember the 6th episode of the show is called Manhandled, and it's about prom night, which is what the Office of Independent Counsel and the FBI named their sort of sting on Monica, if you will. Yeah. So Linda has lured Monica to the Pentagon City Mall. She's sitting reading a magazine, and Linda and 2 FBI agents come up and flash their badges at her and take her into a hotel room. And they named it prom night because they thought it would be 30 minutes in a hotel room with a young girl.
Right.
Is just like disgusting that is like the historical name of this day in her life, because they were convinced they would turn her in 30 minutes. And she held her ground for 12 hours. And Ryan Murphy directed that episode. And we had such incredible directors on this show. But working with Ryan on this episode was such a meaningful moment, meaningful weeks, months. It took us so long to shoot. I
bet.
And there would be moments where I would be sort of like, how would I say it? Like really raw and sort of depleted. And Ryan would come in and he'd be like, I kind of need you to do it again. And from, you know, I need a different shot. I mean, we need to like get this reaction from Colin Hanks or from Darren, or, you know, and I would just say in my head, like, Monica actually had to live through this. I'm just reenacting it. So like, I have to go again. I have to dig deeper.
Wow.
And it's all for her, and it's all to validate what she had to go through. So yeah, it was I don't know if I'll ever have another experience like it in my life.
Totally.
It was once in a lifetime for sure.
Totally. It is going back to the idea of the responsibility of it is what ups the stakes for you or forces you to work harder, right? Like it ups your work ethic. Not even if you didn't know Monica personally, it would still be like you feel this responsibility to recreate this, knowing that the real version of that, of going through that, is so much, well, I don't want to say more traumatic because all trauma is relative and we don't want to compare the two, but
it was real.
You've never been through those hearings, so.
Exactly. Yeah, I think yes, she would, one time Monica sent me, we use Marco Polo. Do you know that app where you can send videos?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
She sent me a video and she was like, hey, Bean, we haven't talked in a long time. And I went to respond and then I was in her wig and in the costume and everything. And I was like, not going to respond right now. So I text because I was like, that's too weird. So I texted her.
Weird.
It's so funny that you think we haven't spoken because I talk to you all day. Every day. I was like, you are the voice in my head. And she was laughing. But I would, and also because of the pandemic, I was living in complete isolation. So I was not interacting with anybody in any capacity unless I was at work. And we were all trying so hard to keep everybody safe that it was our responsibility in some way to go home and not see any, I'm such a rule follower and I'm very moralistic. So in general, for me, the pandemic was I would not take a risk under any circumstances. But even with the show, it became even more intense. And so I was living in complete isolation. So not seeing anyone outside even most of the time. So it was really just me and Monica.
Wild.
Monica was my only friend to talk to. I did Zoom and FaceTime, you guys. I wasn't not speaking to anybody, but it was unique because normally you would
so unique
shoot during the week and then you'd go have brunch with your friends on the weekend, or I'd pick up my nephews from school, or if you're in New York, if you're doing a show, you would go see people during the day or on a Monday. You would just be living around your work schedule. But because of this,
you didn't have any of that.
Yeah, it was just me and Great British Bake Off and Schitt's Creek.
Yes. Oh my God. This is why your notion of taking breaks between takes is so important. And so self-care. It is self-care out of necessity.
Yeah, and it was right for me. I am the least, I try to be the least judgmental person. If what works for you is to do X, Y, or Z, if every respect for X, Y, or Z, as long as it's not hurting anybody or, being respectful, anything anyone needs to do, I have complete respect for. But for me, the most successful and the way to sustain myself the longest was to take those breaks during the day.
Totally. Well, okay, I have to ask you about The Humans as well, because I feel and I don't know how different that is comparing these two projects. It must have been, I imagine, that is a very pandemic-specific project. You guys are on one set, right, with 6 actors?
We shot it before the pandemic, which is so crazy.
Okay, I see. Okay.
Because it would have been a very...
very easy.
Yeah, we would, and it also feels very... I was with the Blake family this morning doing press for The Humans, and Amy Schumer, who plays Amy Blake, Amy was saying it's actually really weirdly perfect for this time because so for those that don't know, The Humans is based off of the Tony Award-winning play, and it's about a family on Thanksgiving, and the actual apartment, which is my character and her boyfriend, played by Stephen Yeun's apartment, is the setting of the Thanksgiving. And it's a Lower East Side Chinatown apartment. And it is...
And it's freaking terrifying.
It is truly, I know people say this a lot, but it is the 7th character in this piece by far. And if those walls could talk, sort of, and...
Literally, yeah.
And you watch, as an audience member, you watch them, you feel them, and you sort of feel like the walls are closing in on you. And so oddly enough, we feel like it's a perfect pandemic piece. And I think people are really going to feel it in a different way almost after this experience than they would have when we filmed it. But we actually filmed it 2 years ago, fall 2019.
How interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it does take on a totally different, connotation. But it is the thing of like, it must have really reminded you of that theater, communal, collaborative experience.
Oh my God.
How many movies are on one set also?
And how many movies get to shoot in order? I mean, that was like literally the dreams, like the dreamiest dream of all dreams was it felt like we were, Amy said it today too, like it felt like we were living it. It was so, we got rehearsal time, which never happens.
Cool. Is that rehearsal with cameras or without cameras?
It was, that's actually a really great question. So we did the first week, I would say, or like 5 days at the table, just like, you know, reading it, talking about it, going through each scene. And then the next 3 or 4 days we did in sort of a taped out space, like of what the apartment would look like. But we did not rehearse on camera at all until like the day as you normally would. But it was just, and also like some of the scenes are quite long and we would do it all continuously. Like there's this really moving scene where we all kind of go around and say what we're grateful for and the Thanksgiving meal. And there was so much that we would be like 8-10 minute takes. So it really felt like you were living and you had to be alive at every moment. And Stephen Karam is a gift. He is like, his writing is so exceptional, and anything that sounds improvised is not. It's actually very specifically written. He writes in like the exact moment of a word when the other person has to start interrupting. So it's beautiful to behold the script. Everything that you would think is sort of just loose people talking over one another is orchestrated in a way. It's
not improv.
And he's such a dream. But this is his directorial debut, and I said it from summer of 2019. Like I could just see the movie behind his eyes. Like he spoke about what he wanted and the way he communicated with us and with our incredible cinematographer and the sort of landscape that they created together. You could just see that he could see it. And that is such a beautiful thing and such it puts everyone at ease because you just know you're in such good hands. I love this movie. I really love it. It also makes me feel so existential because it's called The Humans. It's so about, you sort of feel yourself on the earth as you watch it. Like, it's a very existential experience, I find.
That's such a great description. Yeah, totally.
And that spooks me out a little bit, as it should.
So much.
But
I didn't breathe for the last 10 minutes of this movie.
You'll really be reeling. And for me, a great theater story is that, I was going to say, to work with the likes of like June Squibb and Jane and Richard Jenkins was unbelievable. I didn't know this till we were shooting, but June was in the original company of Gypsy on Broadway as one of the strippers.
Oh my God. Really?
And I used to pretend, and she knew I was pretending, but I used to pretend to not know the words till you gotta get a gimmick so that she would sing it with me. And I'd be like, June, what is it again? You can, and she'd be like, you can, and we would sing the whole thing together. And it was honestly like my theater kid heart just like exploded. But to work with June and Jane, who's reprising her role in the film, and Richard Jenkins, I mean, it was just, I learned so much from watching them too. And Richard and the way he approaches projects and the way he approaches the material and how he's just so natural. You just believe like every word that comes out of his mouth. And Jane, to watch her, I watched her from the audience the first time playing the role. And so to watch her and to form our dynamic as mother-daughter was so beautiful. And, there are moments in the piece that are about like bodies and food and eating, and there's sort of a very kind of tense dynamic between my character and her character, and sort of exploring that with her was really beautiful. And talk about sisters, like Amy is just like, she's everything that you hoped she would be. she's the funniest, wittiest. I mean, she had us all crying in laughter even just today. Like, she's just so funny. But she's also heart-wrenching in the movie. And it's like, I cry every time she did. Her character is experiencing heartbreak, and she has this really touching phone call. And every time she would do it, we would all be crying because it was just so, we all know that feeling of really wanting to talk to someone and them just not giving you what you need from that conversation. And it's a beautiful film, and it's only the six of us in it, and it's just like sort of six people, like we sort of acting as one. I can't describe it. It sort of feels like we were all one person.
Yeah. And really beautifully, like you're saying, the talking over each other, and like it's a great example of people who are talking at each other but maybe not with each other. It's like everyone is isolated, even though they're all trapped there together. They're all individually isolated too.
Which I think during the pandemic, people will really feel in a new way, maybe.
It's going to speak to people on a, as you said, very existential level.
Yes.
And I just love this notion of, like, you put it so beautifully, the idea of the putting in the energy and what you take out of it. Every acting role, it sounds like, because I always ask, like, what did you learn from the latest project? What are you taking with you? And I love this notion of it's almost a transactional thing. Like, this is what I put in and this is what I take out. I put in a bunch of physical work and get out a bunch of emotional work, or vice versa. And like, it's so interesting how one then informs the other, which is all just growth as a human, as a person.
Totally. I think, like, I don't know. I think what I've been lucky enough to take out of almost every project I've done is, like, through lifelong friends, which for me is, like, or family, people that feel like family. And that to me is the greatest gift, because, as I said, people are the thing that matters to me most in life, above any accolade or this or that or whatever it is. So the fact that, like, you know, we've kept our Blake family group text for 2 years, and but you know, that we all stayed in touch and wanted to be there for each other during the pandemic. And, you know, Paulson is, like, stuck with me for life. Like, you know, that is what I really truly take from experiences. But I think if taking on, like, as an actor, Monica changed me forever. I think, I was challenged in ways. I pushed myself in ways I didn't know were almost possible. I grew so much in my own capabilities. I was a producer for the first time. I mean, so much of it was sort of a marathon of challenges, and the feeling on the other side of doing something like that is, I still haven't processed it. I mean, we were all together the other night, and we were all like, still not over it. Like, I am still very much in it.
It'd be weird if you were over it. Like, it makes sense that you're...
So I don't know.
It's such a pivotal, impeachment is obviously a turning point. It's going to be something you look back on and see it as a career turning point. While we're there, can I ask you about Hello, Dolly? Can I ask you about Merrily We Roll Along? You can't talk about Merrily We Roll Along.
I can't really talk about Merrily, but I can talk about Dolly. I can tell you anything you want to know about Dolly.
I'm sorry, Funny Girl. Oh, not Hello, Dolly.
Hello, Dolly. I can tell you anything you want to know about Hello, Dolly.
I saw Hello, Dolly. It was fantastic.
Funny Girl, we have not started. It's currently November when we're having this conversation. We don't start till February. I'm sort of in my own little the prep for the prep, if you will.
That over-preparedness thing, yes.
Exactly. So I'm doing sort of like my own boot camp of sorts. But we don't start formal rehearsal till February, and then it's just the train.
The whirlwind. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean.
And you dressed up as Barbra Streisand in Funny Girl at, like, age 3. Is that true?
I did. It's true.
You manifested.
I can show you the photo. It is surreal. I mean, when I say, like, I'm not exaggerating when I say that I can't remember a thought before that thought. Like, I was 3. Like, that. I think that's when you form your first memories. And this was my very first dream. Get verklempt every time I talk about it. But, you know, which also means like it is so daunting in every way because it's like a forever life thing, it's not.
Sure.
But it is exhilarating in every sense of the word. And I just cannot wait to meet my new team. Like, as we were talking about, like,
Yeah.
Theater, I mean, like my friends from Hello Dolly are still my closest people. Like, there is
That's great.
there's no bond like that in some capacity. As I said, Taylor literally had to like peel me off the floor many times after I'd fallen. So there's like a certain trust that comes with people like that, and so I can't wait to meet my team. I feel like that's the thing that I wake up every day excited for, is like, who is this new family of mine going to be? And I already know they're going to be exceptionally talented, but I can't wait to get to know them as people and bring Fanny's story back to 2021 audiences and honor the woman that Fanny Brice was and the legacy she left behind in this sort of path that she carved.
Absolutely.
She was such a trailblazer and cracked so many glass ceilings, and I certainly would not be able to do what I do if it wasn't for her. And so it's sort of,
talk about responsibility.
I know. So I'm so excited, and Ramin and Jane and Jared, and it's going to be thrilling.
So cool. It's really, thank you so much for letting us into like your artistic process, which is so based on these relationships that you form in the process. That sounds like, I can see that in your work. I can see why those kinds of intimate relationships like directly inform the creation of like a character or like a staying in the moment, like on screen. So Beanie, thank you. I have to ask you a couple last silly backstagey questions.
Okay.
What is your worst audition horror story? We haven't talked about auditions.
Okay, wait, give me another one and then I'll come back.
And the other question we always ask is, what is one performance that you think every actor should see and why?
Oh my God, these are so hard. Okay. Okay, the performance, and it could be performance from any medium. Like if you could go back in time.
Yeah, it could totally be theater. Yeah. It doesn't even have to be a performance, really.
Oh, okay.
Somebody once picked a documentary,
Oh, that's so cool. This is so hard.
I know. I knew that the favorite performance would stump you. It stumps everyone, but I know you have your favorites. Like that list of like dream actors to work with, it makes sense to me that Sarah Paulson's at the top.
Yes.
But I know that the list is long.
Well, honestly, my current answer would be Adrian and Tina, just because it's so fresh in my mind and I've never seen anything. I mean, literally, vocally, physically, emotionally, I've never seen anyone like leave it all out there. And as I said, I saw her second to last show, so I imagine that maybe was part of it, but it also seems like she did that every night.
Yeah.
But the show that sort of can never get out of my heart, like the theater going experience that never leaves, is Seeing the Normal Heart on Broadway.
Sure.
I went with my best friend and he like literally had to lean into my lap because he was crying. So like it was so and no one moved for like 10 minutes after they bowed and the house lights went up. Like no one from the audience stood up. And that, as a collective, as that group of actors, I couldn't put it on one person, but that story,
great,
and the way they brought it to life. I just would say everyone should utilize, if you live in New York, the Lincoln Center archive, because
totally,
it is heaven for anyone that loves theater, and you just need a library card. So it's super easy.
That's such a great point, because that is a way to see a lot of like people's favorite performances. If they're theater, you can actually watch them.
They're accessible.
Yeah.
I went to audition. Sorry, I don't know. Well, I can tell you a worst receiving a role story. Does that count?
Yeah. Sometimes,
9, my kids' theater was doing Bye Bye Birdie, and I was like all prepared to be Kim McAfee, or even like Ursula, like one of her best friends. I was like, here we go, like I'm about to sing How Lovely
9-Year-Old Diva.
Like I'm like ready, like here we go. And our director would read them out because we were like 9, you know. And she was like, and Beanie, you're going to play Conrad Birdie. And I stood up and I said, no, I'm not. And
oh my God.
out of the theater, hysterically crying, and sat on the stairs outside and refused to speak to anybody.
Oh no.
But then, you know what? I wiped away my tears, and my mom went and got me an Elvis wig, and I rocked it out. So
I bet you nailed it. Yeah.
I was really not having that choice at the time. Really
so
not
funny.
having that choice. I'm trying to think of other, like, there's so many performances. There are so many performances. I can't. Comedically, I would say Melissa McCarthy in Bridesmaids is like.
I know that's a formative movie for you.
I cannot get away from every choice she makes. I just I think about them all the time.
Totally.
But yeah, I would say that, The Normal Heart as a piece, like, and then the recent one is Adrian, because I literally, my dad and I cannot stop talking about it. He's like, Bean, remember when she did, like, we just have been like really going into.
She did that every night.
I don't get it. So yeah. Thank you so much. This was so fun.
This was so fun, Beanie. Thank you so much. You made this so easy. You answered all my questions before I even asked them. You're the best.
I'm so glad. Sorry, I don't talk too much.
Oh, no.
Thank you so much.
In the Envelope is recorded at Lotus Productions and Hyperbolic Audio in New York City, and Soundbox LA, Mark Grouse Studios, and Buzzies in Los Angeles. Thanks as always to our producer extraordinaire, Jamie Muffett, and to the team at Backstage, Samantha Sherlock, Mark Stinson, Caitlin Watkins, and of course, Casey Howe. Visit Backstage.com, and don't forget, you can subscribe to Backstage by using the code ENVELOPE at checkout for a free trial. That's right, 100% free. For more exclusive content, join us on Facebook and Twitter at In the Envelope, and subscribe, share, and leave a comment. Who would you like us to interview next? Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next time for another glimpse in the envelope.